On April 29, 2018, a kayaker found the body of a woman in the Lane Cove River in Australia. The victim was later identified as 38-year-old Cecília Haddad, a Brazilian who had lived and worked in Australia for many years. But how did she get there, and who would be responsible for this crime? You will know the details about this now. Cecília Haddad, better known as Cecé, was a woman from Brazil who had lived and worked as a mining executive in Australia for several years. She was 38 years old at the time of the events, had no children, and was described as an independent and very intelligent woman. In Brazil, Cecília worked at a well-known mining company called Rio dos Vale in Rio de Janeiro, and in 2007 she moved to Australia. In Australia, she worked as a logistics manager, and in 2016 opened her own company, THC Consultancy. In the new country she met Brazilians Carol and Rita. Soon, the three became close friends and used to always hang out together. According to friends, Cecília was a friendly and very fun woman. They said she was good-natured and had good energy. For a long time, Cecília dated a man called Mario Marcelo dos Santos Santoro, who was 45 years old at the time of the events and was an engineer. The couple met during college in Rio de Janeiro. Mario ended up unemployed and asked Cecília for help to try to start his life over in Sydney. The two stayed together for a while longer, but for unknown reasons Cecília decided to end the relationship. Mario, however, didn't accept this breakup very well, and it became a big problem in her life. According to reports, Mario made Cecília's life hell after the end of the relationship. He chased her and threatened her. On one occasion, the man broke into her apartment and she had to run to the bedroom where she locked herself using furniture as a barricade. Cecília screamed for Mario to go away while he knocked on the door and tried to enter. For her friends, the fact that Cecília was too kind and good to people ended up turning against her, as she refused to believe that Mario would be capable of physically hurting her, and refused to report him. The man's persecution increased a week before the crime that would take place, and Cecília was desperate to get out of that situation. She then decided to spend a few days with Carol and Rita, who, upon hearing the story, advised her not to return home, as the worst could happen. Her friends suggested that she work from their house since at the time, Cecília was working remotely, but she denied the invitation and said that she needed to be home to work. Upon returning home, Cecília discovered that Mario had secretly made a copy of her keys and entered the property whenever he wanted. A very upset Cecília contacted her friends, saying that there were several signs that the man had entered there and that she could no longer take it. She said she could smell him there, see his hair all over the floor, among other things. Because of her fear, Cecília even sent messages to her friends saying that she was at home, cooking, but in the dark, so that the man would not know she was there if he were watching her. She also did other activities, such as taking a shower with the lights off. In the messages she sent to her friends, Cecília said she knew she was being paranoid, but that she was sure that her ex was following her. Despite all this fear, Cecília thought she had a certain control over Mario and believed that he would never do anything bad to her. One day before the crime, security cameras filmed Mario leaving his house and going to Cecília's apartment several times. In total, he went to her apartment 5 times throughout the day and during the night, and then he left again to watch her. On the day of the crime, Cecília was calm in her apartment for the first time in a long time, after learning that Mario had booked a flight to Brazil, and in just 4 days, he would be out of her life forever. This was the relief that Cecília needed to finally feel safe in her home, but this trip was actually part of Mario's macabre plan. Cecília told one of her friends that Mario had asked her to take him to the airport, and she accepted, while this friend condemned this decision and said it was too dangerous. Cecília then claimed that she needed to be sure that Mario would really leave, so that she could feel completely free and calm. Around 7:30 in the morning on April 28, 2018, Mario Santoro left his house and walked for around 10 minutes to Cecília's apartment. He knew she was there and rang the apartment bell to try to go upstairs. Cecília said she didn't want him to go up and that they would only talk after she came down, but the man didn't accept that, and they ended up arguing. He stayed in front of the building for a few hours until, just after 10 o'clock, he used his key to enter the building and go up to the apartment. According to Australian police investigations, as soon as he entered the apartment, Mario and Cecilia had another argument. At one point, he attacked the woman and choked her. With Cecilia already lifeless, Mario wrapped her body in a sheet or blanket, and then, without anyone in the building seeing, he carried her to the parking lot and placed her in the trunk of her car. Then, Mario drove about 8.5 kilometers to a river called Lane Cove. There he placed several stones in all of Cecilia's pockets, and then threw her into the river, believing that her body would sink and remain submerged, hiding evidence. After the crime, Mario took Cecilia's car, went to her house, changed his clothes and abandoned the vehicle at a train station. He then packed his bags and returned to Brazil. Mario arrived in Rio de Janeiro the following day, April 29, 2 hours after Cecilia's body was found in Australia. What happened to Cecília Haddad shocked the entire region in which she lived, and the news of the crime was highlighted in several international press outlets. Cecília had last been seen on Friday night at a barbecue. On Saturday morning, she spoke to some friends on the phone, but after that she was nowhere to be found and did not answer any more calls. According to friends, Cecilia should have attended some appointments that day, but she didn't show up, and this left them very worried. Cecilia's body was found by canoeists floating in the Lane Cove River in Sydney on the morning of the 29th. The site is part of a secluded beach in an affluent suburb on Sydney Harbour. At the beginning of the investigations, Australian police officers found a series of evidence that linked Mario Santoro to the crime. In the place where the body was, men's shoes were found, and in Mario's house there were wet footprints on the floor, which indicated that Mario for some reason discarded his shoes next to his body and returned to the house barefoot. When checking the images from the security cameras of the building where Cecilia's apartment was located, the police saw that Mario appears in these images wearing shoes very similar to those found near the body. This corroborated the theory that those discarded shoes belonged to him. Furthermore, Mario's cell phone signal indicated that he was in the same area where Cecilia's body was found. The Australian police also pointed out that during an examination of Cecilia's car, which was found a few hours after her body, they found traces compatible with the vegetation and sand on the banks of the river. The police also discovered that Mario threw a set of keys from the window of the Uber that took him to the airport. According to the vehicle driver's statement, Mario took advantage of the moment they were passing over a bridge and threw the set of keys into a river. This Uber driver turned out to be an important witness. He was shown to have a great memory. In testimony, he told the police that while taking Mario to the airport, they passed the Gladesville Bridge, and, at that moment, Mario asked him to travel on the left side. It was then that Mario rolled down the window and threw something that the driver said looked like keys. Divers sent by the police found the keys that Mario threw into the river, which turned out to be Cecilia's car keys, which had an iconic Christ, the Redeemer keychain. This was further proof against Mario Santoro. According to Australian detectives, piecing together the crime was a slow and meticulous process with a lot of use of technology, especially surveillance cameras. The cell phone points tracked by the police showed that Mario spent a long time looking for a place to dump the body, traveling to several isolated places in the city. In search of visual evidence, several police officers passed by several houses and businesses along the route taken by Mario in order to accumulate as much footage as possible to prove that it was really him who was taking that route. The red Fiat driven by the man exactly coincided in time and location for the authorities' tracking of his cell phone. The criminal got rid of the body around 7 p.m. that day, 9 hours after taking Cecilia's life. About 20 minutes later, he returned to his house. From the security cameras, it is possible to see the man walking through the courtyard of the house and leaving wet footprints after leaving his shoes on the beach. At home, the man takes off all his clothes and puts them in the washing machine in an attempt to get rid of any evidence. He had no idea there was a camera and that it was filming everything. Afterwards, Mario used Cecilia's phone to send text messages to some of her friends saying that she was going to the Blue Mountains. In an attempt to make the story more real, he abandoned her car near a local train station to simulate that she had caught a train. However, once again the security cameras showed that it was he who was in the car, not Cecília. Through investigations and the collection of countless information, the detectives on the case in Australia were able to trace the chronology of Cecília's last moments alive. They said that, on the day of the crime, the cameras recorded Mario leaving home at 7:25 in the morning and returning at 10:12. Images show Cecília talking to her mother on WhatsApp and also with Mario. She spoke to her mother until 10 am. According to detectives, as soon as he went up to Cecília's apartment, Mario was quick and within minutes she was already lifeless. The mother and friends tried to contact the woman, but she was unresponsive. During the autopsy, injuries were found on Cecília's body that indicated that she had tried to defend herself from the attack. The cause of death was given as suffocation. All this evidence collected by the Australian police was shared with the authorities in Brazil. On July 7, 2018, Mario Santoro was arrested by the civil police of Rio de Janeiro while he was at a friend's house. The man was taken to Bangu 8, which is one of the units of the Garicino Penitentiary Complex in the west zone of Rio. At first he denied that he was responsible for the crime, but when faced with all the evidence that the Australian police had gathered against him and passed on to the Brazilian police, Mario ended up confessing to the crime, but claimed that he did not commit it on purpose. According to him, when he went up to Cecília's apartment to get his passport, as he had a flight booked to Brazil, he and Cecília began to argue. He said he tried to talk to Cecília in a good way, but she didn't want to, and so he squeezed her neck and she fell. Mario said he doesn't remember if Cecília hit her head on the floor. He only remembers picking her up, putting her on the sofa, but she didn't wake up. He claimed to have tried to give her cardiac massage, but it didn't work. From then on, the man said he became desperate about the whole situation and tried to get rid of all evidence of the crime out of fear. Brazil does not have an extradition treaty with Australia, so Mario could not be sent back to answer for the crime in the country where he committed it. However, the Brazilian justice system reached an agreement with the Australian justice system in which they would arrest and try the man in Brazilian territory. As a result, Mario Santoro was kept in prison and was formally accused of the crime against Cecília Haddad. He was held in a provisional detention center where he awaited his trial. In June 2023, Mario Santoro's trial began in a court in Rio de Janeiro. On the first day, the prosecution witnesses were heard. Delegate Fabio Cardoso was the first to speak at the trial. He was the head of the capital's crime station when the crime occurred. The police chief stated that he was contacted by Cecília's family after the crime in Australia and, during the investigations, discovered that Mario used her cell phone posing as the woman, stating that he was going to disappear. The deputy was also responsible for the man's arrest. He also said that, at the time of his arrest, Mario asked the police officers whether the investigation was in Brazil or Australia. John Edward, a detective sergeant in the Australian region where the crime took place, said that Cecília avoided going to the police to report her ex-boyfriend, so as not to harm him, since the man was in the country on a student visa. According to the detective, right from the beginning, the investigations pointed to Mario as the main suspect in the crime. Furthermore, he left the country shortly after the act, and this further contributed to suspicions. Friends and family of the victim also participated in the trial. These friends said that Mario had been pursuing Cecília since the end of their relationship. Maria Muller, the victim's mother, fell ill during the trial and had to be removed from the courtroom. In a statement during his trial, Mario said he was sorry for the crime and even cried. He asked Cecília's family for forgiveness and said that not even he himself understood what happened. For the victim's family, however, this was all just a pretense. João Muller-Haddad, Cecília's brother, said that the criminal's tears were fake. He said that the whole family was shocked to see the man's deceit and how cold he was to cry there, and, in the next moment, stopped crying. According to João, when there was another question, the tears stopped and the man changed his face, indicating that everything was an act. During the trial, the various pieces of evidence that the Australian police were able to gather against the defendant were presented. And finally, Mario Santoro was sentenced to 27 years in prison for the crime against Cecília Haddad. Shortly after the sentence, his defense said they would appeal the decision. Currently, Mario Santoro is incarcerated in a prison in the state of Rio de Janeiro. In an interview, a friend of Cecília said that she wished she had called the police and that she blames herself for what happened. According to Australian police, the warning signs about what was about to happen were very obvious. They recommended that women in the same situation never let it escalate and seek help as soon as they feel in danger. Cecília Haddad's funeral took place in the city of Perth at Penaroo Cemetery in Australia. His body was later taken to Sydney, where he was cremated and his ashes were scattered at sea. And this was the story of Cecília Haddad, a successful woman with a long life ahead of her, who was the victim of a cruel crime committed by a frustrated and malicious ex-boyfriend. Well guys, that's it for today. Thank you for watching until the end. Best wishes, and I will see you next time.